Hello friends, my name is Ramasu. Today we shall discuss about topic the identify stakeholder process of project management. Friend, today's topic is very interesting, especially if you have interest in project management or you are planning to give exam of PMP in near future. So let's start, friend. First of all, I would request to please subscribe to my YouTube channel and click on the bell option as well, so that my new videos can reach to you, and also you can follow me on the Facebook page as well. So friend, today's topic is identify stakeholder. So stakeholder, we all knows that a person who has positive or negative interest in a project, he or she called as stakeholder of a project. Now identify a stakeholder. Stakeholder is a knowledge area as defined by PMBOK guide, and identify a stakeholder is the first process of that particular knowledge area as defined by project management body of knowledge PMBOK. Now identify a stakeholder means that whenever you are going to implement a project, you must have to identify the stakeholder. Identification means that you list down the stakeholders from customer side, especially from customer side, and from vendor side as well. Stakeholder can be external, can be internal. External means those stakeholders which are outside your organization, like the project manager of customer side, the CEO, CTO, project sponsor, etc. So these are the external stakeholders. Internal stakeholders are those stakeholders which are internal to your organization. That means project manager of vendor, functional manager, like the QA manager, deployment team, etc. So these are internal stakeholder. Now friend, it is very important to identify all your stakeholder at a very early stage. Now why it is important to identify all stakeholders? Because see, being a project manager, if you miss any stakeholder at the time of initiation of a project, so what will happen, that particular stakeholder will definitely identify at some later stage, and when he or she identify as a stakeholder in the project, he will definitely come with some change request, some modifications in the scope, and maybe he will not accept the requirements, or maybe he needs some modifications in the process, in the scope document. So obviously whenever he will ask for some changes, so obviously you do the rework in the process, in the requirements, and it will definitely cost you as being a project manager. So it is very important to identify the stakeholder at a very early stage. And remember that identification of a stakeholder is not only the responsibility of a project manager. You must have to involve other team members as well to help you in the identification of a stakeholder. The like we as per the PMBOK guide, for each process we have some inputs, the tools and technique, and the output. So the input for this process, identify stakeholder, first input is the project charter, okay, then business document like business case, etc., which give you the justification of a project. Then project management plan. Always remember that project management plan is a combination of different plans, okay. Then project documents like assumption log, scope documents, project schedule, etc. Then agreements. Agreements means the contracts with the customers, specific contracts, etc., any agreements. Then enterprise environmental factor. Enterprise environment factor means the organization's culture. Each organization, whenever we talk about enterprise environmental factor, each organization has their own culture through which they operate. Like few organizations are like for example very open, they discuss about their stakeholders. Few organizations are very reserved, they don't discuss about their stakeholders. So being a project manager, you should be able to understand the enterprise environment factor, and whatever the approach which you are going to apply in the organization, it should have to be tweaked, it should have to be adjusted as per the organization's culture. So it is very important to successfully complete the project. Then organizational process assets. Organizational process assets means the documents, like for example lesson learned document, the estimates which you used earlier, the stakeholder register, which you have already used in some previous projects, the assessments for estimates or cost, plans, schedule, etc. So all these sorts of documents which you have already in the organization, which you can use for the similar project, are called as organizational process assets here. So all these are the very important inputs for the identified stakeholder. Now the tool to process the inputs. Okay, we have already discussed the inputs. Now the tools which we use to complete this process. First one is the expert judgment. Expert judgment means the for identification of stakeholders, you talk with the domain experts. For example, you can talk with the with some senior project management, that what are the tools and techniques or to identify the stakeholders, etc. So the persons who have interest, who have the expertise in that particular domain, you will discuss with them. Then data gathering techniques. Data gathering techniques means like brainstorming sessions, interviews, surveys, discussions with the customers, discussion with the relevant stakeholders, etc. to identify the stakeholder. Once you identify these stakeholders, their strengths, their weaknesses, their impact, their influence, so then you analyze that particular data. That is called as data analysis. Then data representation. Data representation means that you can use the Excel sheets, Microsoft Word documents, PowerPoint presentations to represent the data, whatever you have gathered from your analysis. So you basically make some Excel sheets to represent your data. Then meetings is another very important tool. Meeting means that meeting with customers, meeting with the stakeholders to identify the stakeholders, to identify their strengths, their weakness, impacts, the influence on the organization, their interest, their expectations, their requirements. So all these things will be identified during the meetings with the customer. So meetings is also a very effective tool to identify the stakeholders. Then the output. We have discussed the input, we have discussed the tool. Now the output of the identify stakeholder process. First one is the stakeholder register. Stakeholder register, just think of this as a Microsoft Word document, or you can say the Excel document. Being a project manager, you have to make the stakeholder register. Stakeholder register simply means that any Excel sheet you can make in which you mention the name of the stakeholder, the role, their interest, strength, weakness, impact, influence, the expectations or requirement, etc. So basically all these sorts of things you can mention in the stakeholder register. Then the change request. After identification of stakeholder, if you identify, for example, you identify some stakeholder who want some changes, so change request may arise after processing this process. Project management plan updates, like for example any schedule changes, any changes in the project management plan can occur after the identification of stakeholder process. And the last one is the project document updates. Project document updates means like, for example, changes in the scope document, changes in stakeholder register, changes in functional specification, etc. So any change can occur in the project documents after completion of identify stakeholder process. In all these four outputs, the most important one is the stakeholder register. It is the major and the most important output of the identify stakeholder. That means once you complete the whole process of identification of stakeholders, you have very important document called as stakeholder register. So friend, thanks a lot for watching the video. I hope you like this video. If you like it, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and thanks a lot for watching the video.